So here's what I want to do. I want to read this little statement that he has on April 29th from this book that was put on that day, and then just talk us through it a little bit for what this means in a time of uncertainty and a time that many of us are like, how can we move through this as quickly as possible to get back to the certain things of life, the things that we could count on. And so here's how it says. We'll start with a verse. And the verse is, "Behold what manner of love the Father has bestowed on us, that we should be called children of God. Therefore, the world does not know us, because it did not know him. Beloved, now we are children of God." And here's kind of this mysterious uncertainty, not knowing what the fullness of the future holds. And it has not yet been revealed what we shall be. There's this picture of this future that Jesus promises that we don't know fully about. And there's this mysterious revelation to come. But we know that when he is revealed, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. And so Oswald Chamber shares this. Our natural inclination is to be so precise, trying always to forecast accurately what will happen next, that we may look upon uncertainty as a bad thing. I'm just going to pause right there. And when I think about this, I think obviously not just what we're going through, but on like a daily, hourly basis, we have weather reports where you and I can literally step outside and look up. But that's not good enough. We want to know what the weather is, when the weather is, how it's going to happen, when it's going to hit. Like the precision is in all areas of our lives that we draw to this sense of certainty and control. And the weather is a minor thing. And if you live in Virginia like I do, there's no point for the Weather Channel at all, because what they could tell you an hour before will absolutely not happen. But for most of us, there's some predictability, and we want this certainty. So we're always trying to forecast accurately what will happen next, that we may look upon uncertainty as a bad thing. The more we get in line, the more certain we're about life, the more we know. And the more we can control things, or think we can control things, the better it's going to be. He goes on. We think that we must reach some predetermined goal, but that is not the nature of the spiritual life. Wait a minute. No, that is the goal. We're supposed to just keep on getting smarter, gain all the biblical understanding, be as smart as that person, maybe go to seminary, at least pick up a bunch of information, and just, there's these goals and aspirations that we have in terms of knowledge that we want to conquer and accomplish. And he says, we think that we must reach some predetermined goal, but that is not the nature of the spiritual life. So hopefully right now it's already stirring some unsettledness, because let me understand God as completely as I can. Let me get everything I can in my head about him. And once I figure that all out, life might be rocky and weird, but all the answers that I've got stored in my head about who God is and what he says, that'll let me navigate it without any uncertainty. The nature of the spiritual life is that we are certain of our uncertainty. Let me read that again. If you're a Christ follower, this is a wild statement. The nature of the spiritual life is that we are certain in our uncertainty. Consequently, we do not put down roots. Our common sense says, well, what if we were in that circumstances? We cannot presume to see ourselves in any circumstance in which we have never been. Certainty is the mark of the common sense life. Gracious uncertainty is the mark of a spiritual life. I see my brother Lou right there saying amen, and he's a good friend of mine, and I know he's living, not just with this, but with other things. We are in this together as Christ followers, is that we want this common sense life. This is how it should go. But gracious uncertainty is the mark of a spiritual life. To be certain of God means that we are uncertain in all our ways, not knowing what tomorrow may bring. This is generally expressed with a sigh of sadness, right? This is how we sit right now. Oh gosh, no. I want all my boxes checked. I want everything in line, and then a little God on top, a little cherry on top, just to make it all kind of settled within his plan. But to be certain of God means that we are uncertain in all our ways, not knowing what tomorrow may bring. This is generally expressed with a sigh of sadness, but, he says, it should be an expression of breathless expectation. So I want you to take a moment and just pause and maybe share, is this how you process your uncertainty? Is it breathless expectation? Is it a sense of, I don't know what tomorrow brings, but I'm excited to be in God's plan and to do whatever he calls me to do? Or is it, no, God, you need to line everything up. You need to make sure that I know exactly what's coming next. And one of the questions that I wanted you to wrestle with is, what would it take, and maybe you can share in the comments, what would it take for you to change from a sadness about uncertainty to a breathless expectation? Share so that other people can read too and hear how you process. What would it take for you to change? Because I'm sure all of us wrestle with this uncertainty. From this sadness of uncertainty to a breathless expectation. He goes on to say, we are uncertain of the next step, but, and here's the kicker, but we are certain of God. As soon as we abandon ourselves to God and do the task that he has placed closest to us, he begins to fill our lives with surprises. So, again, share in the comments if you would be brave enough to. What would it take for you, or even what's the hardest part in order to get to that breathless expectation, that accepted uncertainty of your circumstances with a deeper certainty of God? I see my dad said, I like to say the following hymn is scary, exciting. Scary because of the unknown, yes. Exciting because it's so much greater than I would do. Isn't that the truth? I wonder how many of us can look back on experiences in our lives with God where we've taken steps that are terrifying. And yet we can look back and say, wow, I did not know how that would turn out. And I'm sure that if it was up to me and my way of thinking, I would have never taken those steps. But because I felt prompted by God, I can look back and say, whoa, that was so much greater than I thought. The devotional continues, and it continues in a way that becomes a little bit more practical, begins to kind of answer that question. And he says this, when we become simply a promoter or a defender of a particular belief, something within us dies. That is not believing God. It is only believing in our belief about him. Jesus said, unless you become like little children, in Matthew 18, the spiritual life is life of a child. We are not uncertain of God, just uncertain of what he is going to do next. If our certainty is only in our beliefs, now Christians, take this as a loving critique, and even as I read this, I got to check myself. If our certainty is only in our beliefs, we develop a sense of self-righteousness, becoming overly critical, and are limited by the view that our beliefs are complete and settled. But when we have the right relationship with God, life is full of spontaneous, joyful uncertainty and expectancy. Jesus said, believe in me, not believe certain things about me. Oh, that's a critique for me for sure, is that in times of uncertainty, to answer that question, what would it take to change to the breathless expectations? My immediate reaction is, Oh, I just need to learn more about what I believe and just have more confidence in what I believe. And there's something that's healthy to that in terms of gaining a fuller understanding of what you believe and why you believe. But if that, what he's saying here, if that becomes the object of trying to settle your uncertainty and not God himself, you're going to get nowhere. If you're just driving to convince yourself of the belief that you have, primary, before God himself, that's not what God has called us to do. He's called us to believe in him. And when we believe in him, that uncertainty gets strengthened in a reality of our certainty in God. So, in this time, as I'm sure all pastors are encouraging people to be in the Word, to spend time in prayer, the question is, are you spending time to drive home your beliefs and to make sure that you're confident in your beliefs? Or are you spending time with God to get to know him, to draw yourself to him, to allow him to draw himself to you, to drive your certainty to him? And here's what I also want to add that he doesn't have in here. But when Jesus ascends, the last thing he tells his disciples, he go into all the nations, and then he says, I will be with you always. I will be with you always. And then these disciples are tortured, they're exiled, they're killed. And the confidence that they have is that God's presence is with them. Their certainty is in the risen Jesus Christ. And so Oswald Chamber's critique here is, become as little children, the spiritual life of a child. We are not uncertain of God, and our belief is in him, not our beliefs. Our beliefs are filtered first through this lens of a loving relationship and trust in God himself. Okay? So, we'll end with this, and I think this is a beautiful summary. This is the last couple sentences of what he says. He ends his devotion, or the devotional compilation is ended with this. Leave everything to him, and it will be gloriously and graciously uncertain how he will come in. But you can be certain that he will come. Remain faithful to him. Remain faithful to him. So my challenge to you is that this devotional that I read for April 29th, just over a month away, is to spend time in the Word, to spend time praying, directed at your relationship with God, and acknowledging areas of uncertainty that make you anxious. And spend the next 30 days, I challenge you, I want to encourage you, spend the next 30 days daily praying, God, would you turn that nervous, sad uncertainty to breathless expectation? Would you do something in the loss of my job? Would you do something in my financial fear? Would you do something in my health fears? That I don't know what's coming next, but God, would you change it from, I want to know, I want to have everything in line, to, God, would you bring something out of this where my trust is in you, where I can have breathless expectation because I am certain of who you are. I am certain of what you've done. And write down April 29th, gracious uncertainty. Put it somewhere that you see every day, whether it's your car, if you're an essential worker and going to work or not, whether it's on the fridge. Put April 29th, gracious uncertainty. And every day when you see that, pray, God, would you give me breathless expectation because my certainty is in you, not my circumstances. And then you can say that, God, I'm not certain about my money. I'm not certain about my work. I'm not certain about religious freedom. I'm not certain about the kids. I'm not even certain about tomorrow. But God, if you give me finances, if you give me work, if you don't allow finances to make ends meet, if you don't allow me to work, if tomorrow doesn't come the way that I want it to come, I can live in breathless expectation because my certainty is in you.